first paragraph is about the Feeding America economic model, which shows that just knowing the long-term relationships between unemployment and hunger, and they were able to see what the increase in hunger and food insecurity would likely be. But the Census Bureau this year, for the first time, is doing weekly surveys to find out every week about the welfare of families in this country. It comes out every Wednesday morning. I find it's pretty complicated to interpret, so I rely on the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities and a group at the Brookings Institute called the Hamilton Project to interpret it. What those current numbers, I mean, I find them appallingly intimate. You know, parents are being asked, over the last 7 days, have the children in your house not been able to eat what they ought to eat because you just couldn't afford to protect the kids? But these are 1 in 6 families that say that their children are not getting the food they need. And that amounts to 14 million children. That number, this question was asked before the crisis, and the number now is 5 times what it was before the crisis. And then African American, Latino, and Asian families with children have been hit even more severely than white families. Jessica, why don't you show that next page? This is from a Hamilton Project study. So you can see that there's been a jump in households with children that are food insecure, also among white families, and that's a lot of people, a lot of white families. The kids are going hungry. But then you can see that the rate is higher among Asian families, higher among Hispanic families, and highest among Black families. So I think to me, the news story is that in any given week, 14 million kids are not eating enough, and that's 5 times higher than it was before the crisis. Then show the next page. Bread for the World mobilizes people of faith to urge Congress and the president to do their part to end hunger. They represent us. And as Amy said, she said that all of the food that the wonderful Feeding America system is able to mobilize is about 1/9 of what just one of the federal the largest of the federal nutrition programs provides, SNAP. So it's important. It is really important that people be generous, that they volunteer, that they work at the local pantry. My wife's doing it. She's making phone calls to Latino families who need rental assistance and food. That's really important. It's personal. You can't go away from that. But getting our public policies right is much, much more important to hungry people, the good for you things. And then as the food as their money runs out, they buy more ramen noodles. And then the last 5 days of the month in many households, the mom goes without food. And then the last 2 days, maybe the kids go without food. So you're right. But I think there are things that can be done to educate people, to help people learn how to cook in a nutritious way with an economical food budget. So all those things are important. But the main thing is that people are just too damn poor. That's a theological term.
Oh my God.
Since I'm a minister. They won't eat. I mean, a lot of low-income people know that, they know as well as we do that organic foods, fruits and vegetables are better for us. But most of us are a little bit obese, and then if you're poor and you can't buy the quality foods, then you're much more likely to become obese. It also is a factor that those moms who tend to go without food for a number of days. Then when the card fills up, they binge eat. So you get it really contributes to obesity. And then also undernutrition as a little child results in obesity in middle age. It's a cruel system. Yeah.
Thank you. We need to move forward, and we have another speaker. But no, it's not about you. It's that there are so many questions.
Yeah.
But how aware is the public of rising hunger? We just saw. How aware is the public
Not. Right? I think people know that people are hungry.
But for example, we just had 2 political conventions, so there was no talk about hunger.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think that's for lack of knowledge. I mean, I think that's for lack of give a damn. That's because the consultants who advise the Democrats tell them don't use the word poverty. And so they're very scrupulous about it. You know, Obama finally, about in the 3rd year of his first term, started using the word poverty. I counted 4 mentions of poverty at the Democratic convention. So I think people do, like the story about 14 million kids not eating in any given week, and that's 5 times as many as before the crisis. People don't know the scale. But then the other thing is that even when we know, it's just too easy to think, well, that's somebody else. And I don't know, it's a spiritual problem that we don't care enough. I should say on that, since we're talking about the convention, that program the program I outlined to get the economy and reduce poverty, that is basically Build Back Better, Vice President Biden's program. If you have that, I think that, whether it's exactly right or not, but that where he's going, where he would take us, would give us our best chance of creating a healthy economy and reductions in.
Hello, my name is Jovanna Lopez. I am a co-founder of the People's Nite Market. We started in 2015 as kind of the word I'm trying to use is like we saw that the food banks were distributing food that was rotting, food that was not nutritious for our communities, Black, Indigenous, Latino communities. And so it was kind of one of the, and on top of that, the only farmers market we had in town was this very bourgeois boutique market that didn't take food stamps. And so it was our call to provide something for the community that would create access to fresh fruits and vegetables. Because it was definitely not something that was being done in our community. We were having to travel to other places for organic food or affordable produce. And so with that, we have been working within the community. And when I say community, I say San Antonio community, because not only do we work in the Latino community, but we work with Indigenous, Black, we have Burmese community, we have Afghani community that we work with, a lot of different refugees and undocumented people that we help through other organizations. So I guess my title would be kind of a food activist, promotora, which is like a community health worker, and a community connector, because a lot of my job is to connect people with organizations that will give them access to food. And so that's really our objective as the People's Nite Market, is to create any kind of access to fresh fruits and vegetables and things that are just way more, way healthier than what we're being given through food banks and other food commodities throughout the city. The situation before COVID was already dire. And like I said, we had been dealing with so many different food distributions at different housing places where they would get a bag of salad that was already rotting or expired, avocados that were already past their ripeness. And so when COVID started, it's like all of this poverty and hunger came to the surface. People were kind of trapped in their apartments, especially elderly and handicapped and people that had no access to transportation to get to anywhere. And, and many people that had compromised immune systems couldn't do that anyway. So they were stuck and having to eat whatever was there or whatever somebody could bring to them. One of the stories that sticks with me is there was an older woman, I believe she was 85. Her family did not come to see her very often, and she had been surviving off of loaves of bread. And she would eat bread throughout the day. She said she would try to conserve it because she didn't want to run out. She didn't know when she could get more food beyond that. Luckily now, through all of our connections in the community, she gets a fresh box of produce. We try to take her rice and beans when we can, and meat as well, so that she has some kind of protein, some kind of nutrients. And even now, one of the biggest battles that we're finding at housing facilities is that the food bank will not feed anybody that's below 60 in these facilities. They will only do food commodities for 60 and over. There's moments where they do this thing called the cheese box, and that will feed most people, but majority of the programs that are in these housing facilities are for 60 and above. So that doesn't cover anybody that's young and disabled. It doesn't cover anybody that might be between jobs, and even families that are kind of stuck at home right now. And so these food boxes are not sustainable. That's the one thing that I've been trying to repeat to public officials that I've been talking to, trying to get them to understand that we need to look for funding to be able to continue this in a different way. And so I also work as an urban farmer with Ecocentro and Garcia Street Farm on the east side of San Antonio. The San Antonio Housing Authority has leased us this land for $1 a year. And for me, this is one of my solutions to keeping the community fed in a sustainable way. And for me, I think that the government, especially local government, because what happened here in San Antonio is that a lot of the policies that are in place are here for developers. It is so hard to buy an empty lot in San Antonio to use for urban farming. There's so many people that want to do it, but there are so many things that are up against us to be able to allow people to grow their own food, to be able to sustain or supplement what they're already bringing home. And I do agree that the minimum wage does need to be brought up, and food stamps, but I also think that we need to be able to give the community the power to be able to grow their own food as well if they're wanting to and willing to. But we are just not, especially in San Antonio, we're fighting with the Unified Code Development Department to try to get policies changed to be able to do away with a lot of the platting fees, because at the very beginning, I think it's like $20,000 to plat a small piece of land that you want to grow on. How many people have $20,000 to be able to do that? Not many people trying to grow their own food. And so,
Jovanna, how can people do small grassroots efforts? You talk about this a little bit, but can you be a little bit more specific?
I think, or I feel, at least what has happened for me is I have a really, really big, I like to call it the big community spider web, because I'm very well connected in this town to so many different resources for different communities in San Antonio. And so I think a lot of the way that you're able to do that is to just connect with one organization. And the chances are is that they're going to connect you with someone else. And I know everybody's got jobs, so I don't expect this to be a full-time job like I have a job doing this. But for me, it's getting out into your community, getting to know your local council person as well, because through that, you're able to connect yourself with other community leaders that are trying really hard to keep their community fed. Honestly, that right now has been the main thing happening during COVID, and keeping people housed. Housing is another big issue here. And from what I understand, the San Antonio Housing Authority is not going to evict any of their residents